Welcome back to the Summer Diaries. This one is episode 2. I'm going to talk today about the nutrition approach I am taking through my fat loss phase through the summer, which is also being done by a number of the guys in the Mind and Matter Method community as well. So as I talked about on the last episode, I'm going through a bit of a fat loss phase through July and August to try and get to a lean starting point for a long productive gaining phase from September into 2026. And I decided to try a different dietary approach this time. The standard anti-diet method protocol that I have used for many years for both fat loss and muscle gain works perfectly well. But I fancied trying something a bit different as something that could potentially work for a specific kind of client that I work with within the program as well. And it's what I call a pseudo 5-2 intermittent fasting protocol. If you are familiar with the anti-diet method, or even if you're not, we use intermittent fasting as a strategic optional tool simply to make managing calories a little bit easier, to align your nutrition to your lifestyle, and especially in a fat loss phase, allow you to eat large, delicious, satisfying meals with the trade-off that maybe now and then you're going to be a little bit hungry. I call that a pseudo 16-8. So 16-8 is a classic, don't eat for 16 hours and then you eat all your meals in an 8-hour eating window. So the easiest way to do that, if you work a typical 9 to 5, is to stop eating at 8 p.m, then go to sleep, then skip breakfast, and then start eating at midday. So you have lunch, maybe an afternoon snack, evening meal, maybe an evening snack. You manage your calorie deficit a lot easier because you are essentially skipping a meal. Now, we make some modifications to that within the anti-diet method because I want to make sure that people are not sacrificing their protein intake to cut their calories too low. So the typical recommendation I make if you are following that exact protocol is to simply have a protein shake for breakfast. So it's still going to be 120 to 140 calories. It's not a true fast, but you're getting another 30 to 40 grams of protein. You're spiking muscle protein synthesis more frequently, which is a good thing. And if you can spike MPS 3 to 4 times through the day, you're giving yourself the best chance of protecting muscle mass, gaining muscle, potentially depending on how long you've been training and managing your nutrition properly. But it just makes the diet so much easier. And I have been following that myself for years. It just aligns to my lifestyle. I don't feel hungry in the mornings. I'm at my most productive and most focused in the mornings. So I like to just work, train, come home, start work. I don't do calls in the morning. So 9 till 12 is like my highest priority, most focused work block of each day. And I don't think about food. I don't want to think about food. But the trade-off is at lunchtime, I get to eat a large, delicious, satisfying meal that doesn't just have to be protein and plants. I can throw in some delicious, healthy fats or maybe some carbs into that meal. Have a large evening meal without imposing my fat loss demands on my partner or my family. And then just have some sort of high protein dessert, which is typically skyr yogurt with crushed up meringue and some granola and fruit. So that's a 16-8. The 5-2 is a little bit different. This was popularized by Dr. Michael Mosley, who did a BBC series about it, possibly, or definitely an episode, and then wrote a book about it. And then tragically passed away a year or two ago. It's very sad. But he did leave an impact and a positive legacy around popularizing innovative ways of eating that broke free from the default 3 to 4 meals a day, carb heavy meals, and so on. The 5-2 is typically aimed at people who want to eat healthier, lose a bit of fat, but they're probably not doing a load of exercise. They're definitely not doing a load of resistance training. And therefore, it's good for a general population. It's not that great for an athletic population who have a strong motivation and desire to transform their physique by losing some body fat and gaining some muscle, looking lean, defined, and getting stronger and getting fitter. Mosley's recommendation was to have 2 non-consecutive days a week where you're eating 600 to 800 calories a day. And then on the other 5 days of the week, you're basically eating whatever. There's nothing magical about that, but it's a big shift in mindset for someone who has struggled with diets or struggles to maintain a caloric deficit every single day, to just think there are 2 days of the week, say a Monday and a Thursday, where I'm dieting and the other 5 days I'm not. Now, I remember when this first became mainstream a long time ago now, and There was a guy in my office in his 60s who was doing it. He had the wrong mindset, though, because he was of the mindset of, on these 5 days, I'm going to eat everything. He was talking about getting takeaway curry and drinking beers, and that's not really the mindset. You still have to be mindful of what you're doing on those 5 days, obviously, because you could easily undo the sacrifice and the hard work you're putting in on 2 fat loss days by overeating on the other 5. So that's not how we approach it. We do keep that same framework of 2 fast days in inverted commas and 5 feast days in inverted commas, but we're still following the principles of the anti-diet method. So the way that we are doing it is I'm recommending my clients have 2 days where they're eating 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day, because then it becomes challenging, but still manageable. And some guys might feel like they can go a bit lower on those days, which is totally fine. But we're still tracking what we're eating using the principles of the anti-diet method. And on the other 5 days, we're eating at maintenance or slightly below maintenance. So we're still creating a caloric deficit every day. But if your caloric deficit on 5 days a week is just 200, 300 calories below maintenance, that can be loads of food. Even for me, and I'm light and small. So if I can find that easy, then most other people should be able to as well. Knowing that 2 days of the week, I'm going to be a bit hungry. And we are combining that, or I am, and I'm recommending others, with 16-8. So that means that on the 5 days, the feast days, you are still in the caloric deficit, but it's marginal. You're still having a protein shake for breakfast, and then you're still getting 2 to 3 big, satisfying meals in the afternoon, assuming you're doing your 8-hour eating window in the afternoon. And then on the 2 days, I would highly recommend that you try and get all of your calories in 1 to 2 servings, because trying to eat 1,000 calories in 4 250 calorie meals a day is going to be miserable. And it will be much more satisfying to get a proper evening meal and then maybe a snack. So the way I'm doing that, and the way I'm recommending others do it, is fasting through until lunch, and then having a protein shake for lunch, and then having a normal evening meal. And the results for me and for other guys in the community have been excellent so far, very promising. Now, this is a tiny experiment. I'll talk more about tiny experiments in another episode, but it's an idea popularized by Anne-Laure Lecunff in a book that I bought earlier this year and is fantastic. And I've actually bought other people the same book since then who've all loved it. But we're running it as an experiment to see if it's something that we can recommend wholesale within the Mind and Matter method, because I want to know what kind of person it works for and doesn't work for. And it's working well for guys who have been plateaued for a while with their fat loss efforts. And the reason, I think, is because depending on your lifestyle, maintaining a caloric deficit every single day can be tricky. So there are guys in the community who work their ass off the first 5 days of the week or the first 4 days of the week, and they find it easy to be in routine and structure and disciplined, but then they want to let loose a little bit at the weekend, which I totally get if you're in a stressful, demanding job, waking up at 5 a.m. to work until 2 to 3 in the afternoon, and then the only time you get to see your friends or do anything remotely enjoyable is the weekend. So it's working well for people who have that kind of lifestyle and want to let loose a bit at the weekend. It's working very well for guys who travel a lot with work and they're not always in control of the food that's available to them. So if you're in a hotel or you're with a client on site outside of your usual routine, you typically have no control. And typically what's going to happen is there's going to be sandwiches, baked goods, fried things, and not a lot of healthy food. And you can compound that then with evenings where you're at higher risk of eating more or drinking some alcohol, especially if you are with clients or you're with colleagues who are taking you out for dinner or whatever. So it's working very well in those cases. I've got one client in particular who is treating those days as fast days. So 2 of the days he's been away on a work trip abroad are just, these are the days I'm not eating until the evening, and then I'm going to choose high protein options. And he's made fantastic progress. And the other group that seems to be working for is people who work shifts. So unpredictable shift patterns. I'm lucky enough to decide my own working hours, and I gravitate to the working hours I've always had, which is 9 to 5. And most of my clients work 9 to 5, but some of them work unpredictable shift patterns. And it's working well there as well, because you can be of the mindset of, I'm on shift. I'm not eating for this 16-hour, 20-hour window. maybe extending it even longer if you want to. But then I know that when I finish my shift, I can eat freely and I can have enjoyable meals. So I'm down 2.5 kilograms. One of my clients, Ben, has dropped more body fat in the last 2 to 3 weeks of doing this than he had in the last 2 to 3 months beforehand. So very promising. And the reason I'm enjoying it is it was Father's Day a few weeks ago. We went out to meet Lucy's parents in Northallerton. We went to a really nice restaurant for lunch. And typically, if I'm in a fat loss phase and we're going to a restaurant, I will look at the menu in advance. I will think, what can I have? What can't I have? What's off limits? I'll choose a salad. I'll maybe choose a starter or a light dessert. But I'll have to be constrained, and I'll be thinking about, I'm going to track this and I'm going to estimate it, obviously, because most restaurants, apart from the big chains, don't have all of their nutritional information readily available. But I'm going to have to make healthy choices. But because that was a feast day, in inverted commas, and because I'd done 2 fasting days earlier that week, it was actually easy. I just chose whatever I wanted. I didn't have to think about it. I had 2 starters, I think, and a big main and a dessert. And that was like, that's my food. I'll have something light in the evening, but that's my main meal today. Rather than in the evening, I just had it at lunch, a lighter evening meal. And over the course of the week, I was still in the caloric deficit. I dropped 1 kilogram, I think, of a combination of water weight and body fat. But that is the reason I'm finding it easy and enjoyable. It's a fasting day right now. It's 10:10. Talking about food might be making me a little bit hungry, but once you do this a little bit, you realize that it's actually okay to be hungry now and then. You're not going to die. Nothing bad will happen. And you also learn that hunger has a quality about it that's quite different to what we assume. So I think a lot of people think you feel hunger signals and those signals grow and grow and grow until you become ravenous and then you just eat everything, or you have this desire to eat everything. But in my experience, hunger doesn't work like that. Hunger comes and goes in waves. So I'm feeling hungry right now. I've got some calls coming up with clients. I know when I'm on them, I'm not going to be thinking about food. I know that the hunger signals will probably go, and then maybe they come back a bit later in the afternoon. But then by that point, it's fine because I'm focusing on work. And then I know that my evening meal's coming and I'm going to be excited about that. And then I'm going to eat something delicious in the evening and I'm going to have my usual high protein dessert. And then I'll be back for the rest of this week following my usual process. So it's working very well. And I am pretty sure it's going to be a default optional recommendation like the 16.8 or the Pseudo 16.8 is. We're going to have a Pseudo 5.2 option as well. And those can be combined along with the principles of the anti-diet method. I think it's important to note what kind of situation it will work well in. Although I haven't found one yet that it won't work well in. It's just a different way of approaching things. There's nothing magical about these fasting protocols. There's no net benefit over just following a standard caloric deficit every day, but it just allows you to approach the fat loss nutrition in a different way, and approaching it in a different way works well for some people in some of those circumstances that I talked about earlier. So that's it, guys. I will update you later in the summer on how my fat loss is going. I've forecasted being done by the end of August. I would love to be done before then, if possible, but we'll see. I'm not putting a big aggressive timeline on it just because that's not what the summer is about for me. Hope this has been helpful. I'll see you next time.